Today I would like to invite you to listen to the Dhammapada of the Buddha Shakyamuni, the 129th verse from the Buddhist scriptures on the YouTube channel Thien Thai in the USA. All tremble at the rod. All fear death. Comparing others with oneself, one should neither strike nor cause to strike. This verse teaches the principle of universal compassion and the awareness of suffering that all beings share. In the story related to this teaching, there was a ruler who believed in strict punishment and used the rod to maintain order among his subjects. One day, a wise monk visited the court and observed the fear and agitation that the ruler's actions caused among the people. The monk said to the ruler that all beings tremble at pain, fear death, and wish to avoid suffering just as he himself does. By reflecting on the common desire to be free from suffering, the ruler was guided to see that inflicting harm is not the path to peace or virtue. The monk explained that ethical living begins with empathy and understanding, recognizing that others feel as we do, and that causing pain brings negative consequences both to the victim and the doer. The ruler, contemplating these words, began to understand that compassion and restraint are the foundations of ethical action, that true strength lies in protecting life and fostering peace rather than instilling fear. The verse awakens the disciple to the realization that harm inflicted upon another is ultimately harm done to oneself, and that mindfulness, ethical restraint, and compassion are the way to create harmony, peace, and spiritual merit in every action. The teaching emphasizes that all living beings, without exception, fear suffering and death. The monk illustrated that even those who appear strong or fearless experience agitation, pain, and fear, and that recognizing this universal truth cultivates compassion in the mind of the practitioner. By contemplating the shared experience of fear and suffering, the disciple is motivated to act with restraint, avoiding harm in thought, word, and deed. Ethical conduct is thus inseparable from empathy, for a mind that recognizes the pain of others naturally refrains from causing injury. Meditation on the principle of universal suffering deepens understanding, allowing the disciple to respond with compassion rather than aggression, fostering harmony and reducing the cycle of fear and violence in the world. Furthermore, the verse teaches the importance of equanimity and moral reflection in daily life. The monk explained that the disciple should compare others with oneself, imagining the fear and pain they experience, and thereby refrain from causing harm. This principle is not merely theoretical, but practical and applicable in every action, from the smallest gesture to the most significant decision. Ethical awareness requires continual mindfulness, observing the consequences of one's actions and maintaining vigilance against anger, aggression, and cruelty. The disciple learns that restraint and compassion are not signs of weakness, but expressions of wisdom and understanding, providing protection for oneself and others from suffering and negative karmic results. The story also illustrates the consequences of harming others. The ruler was warned that inflicting pain, even under the guise of maintaining order, produces karmic repercussions that affect the doer as well as the victim. The monk explained that all actions bear results, and that causing suffering accumulates unwholesome karma, which will inevitably ripen in the future. By observing this law of cause and effect, the disciple develops ethical vigilance, understanding that harm inflicted upon another, whether intentionally or through negligence, ultimately brings suffering to oneself. The principle of non-harming, therefore, is both compassionate and practical, guiding the disciple to live mindfully, ethically, and with care for all beings. The verse emphasizes the cultivation of empathy as the foundation for ethical conduct. The monk taught that by contemplating the fear and suffering of others as if it were one's own, the disciple naturally develops restraint, patience, and kindness. This reflection transforms the mind, reducing anger, aggression, and harshness, while increasing compassion, understanding, and generosity. The disciple learns that ethical living begins in the mind, where awareness of the suffering of others guides thought, speech, and action. By practicing this principle consistently, the mind becomes a source of peace and protection for oneself and others, fostering harmony and reducing conflict in all spheres of life. Moreover, the teaching encourages the disciple to integrate compassion and mindfulness in every moment. The monk explained that ethical living is not confined to overt actions, but includes subtle intentions, words, and mental attitudes. Observing one's own mind, recognizing tendencies toward anger, aggression, or harm, and cultivating restraint and understanding is essential. The disciple learns that ethical vigilance transforms habitual patterns, preventing harm before it occurs, and creating a mind that naturally embodies compassion, patience, and wisdom. In this way, ethical conduct is both preventative and transformative, producing merit, inner peace, and spiritual growth. The verse also teaches that fear of death and pain is universal, transcending species, status, and circumstance. The monk illustrated that all beings, human and non-human, experience the wish to avoid suffering. By recognizing this, the disciple develops a broader sense of compassion, extending care beyond familiar beings to all living creatures. Ethical restraint and compassionate action are therefore guided not by fear of punishment or social approval, but by genuine awareness of the shared condition of life. The disciple learns to act with kindness, protect life, and cultivate virtue, understanding that all beings share the experience of vulnerability, fear, and suffering. The story further emphasizes the practical benefits of non-harming. The ruler observed that when fear and aggression govern conduct, distrust, agitation, and conflict arise, whereas when compassion, empathy, and restraint guide action, peace, trust, and harmony naturally emerge. The monk explained that non-harming is not passive, but an active cultivation of virtue, mindfulness, and understanding. By refraining from causing pain and cultivating kindness, the disciple strengthens relationships, reduces suffering, and generates merit that protects the mind and creates favorable conditions for spiritual growth. The principle of universal non-harming thus applies to all areas of life, guiding action, speech, and thought. Furthermore, the verse emphasizes moral responsibility. The monk taught that comparing others with oneself is not merely a thought exercise, but a way to cultivate ethical discernment and moral awareness. By reflecting on how one would feel if subjected to harm, the disciple naturally develops restraint, compassion, and care in every action. This principle safeguards both self and others from suffering, creates merit, and fosters conditions for awakening. The disciple learns that ethical cultivation is the foundation of spiritual development, producing peace of mind, clarity, and understanding, even in challenging circumstances. The verse also highlights that ethical awareness is a continuous practice, requiring diligence and mindfulness in every moment. The monk explained that one cannot selectively act with compassion. Ethical conduct must permeate thought, speech, and deed. By practicing continuous mindfulness and reflecting on the shared experience of fear and suffering, the disciple strengthens the mind, reduces harmful tendencies, and cultivates merit and wisdom. Compassion, restraint, and ethical vigilance become natural qualities, guiding the disciple through life with integrity and understanding. Finally, the teaching encourages the disciple to embody universal compassion in all interactions. The monk illustrated that all beings, regardless of form or circumstance, experience fear and suffering. By cultivating empathy, ethical awareness, and non-harming, the disciple creates harmony, reduces suffering, and generates merit that protects the mind and fosters spiritual growth. The principle of comparing others with oneself becomes a guiding light for ethical action, reminding the practitioner that causing harm is both unnecessary and unwise, while cultivating compassion, understanding, and restraint leads to peace, clarity, and liberation. As we continue to reflect on the 129th verse, the disciple understands that the principle of non-harming is not limited to physical action alone but extends to words, thoughts, and intentions. The wise monk emphasized that the mind is the source from which all action arises, and therefore, cultivating a mind of compassion and restraint is paramount. When one contemplates the fear, pain, and suffering of others, the mind naturally refrains from violence, harsh words, and negative intentions. The disciple learns that even subtle mental aggression, resentment, or ill will contributes to the cycle of suffering. By observing the mind carefully and applying mindfulness, one develops the ability to prevent harmful actions before they manifest externally, protecting both oneself and others from the consequences of negativity. This awareness becomes a guiding principle in every interaction, shaping the disciple's character and ethical life. The verse also teaches the importance of empathy as the foundation for ethical behavior. The monk explained that when one truly places oneself in the position of others, imagining their fear, vulnerability, and pain, the mind naturally cultivates kindness, patience, and compassion. Just as one would not wish to experience harm oneself, the disciple learns to extend that wish to all beings. This reflection nurtures an expansive heart, free from selfishness, cruelty, and indifference. Ethical conduct becomes a natural expression of understanding and compassion, creating harmony in relationships, in communities, and within oneself. The disciple gradually realizes that non-harming is not merely the avoidance of violence, but the active cultivation of benevolence, protection, and care for all beings. Moreover, the teaching highlights the universality of fear and mortality. The monk illustrated that all beings, regardless of species, social status, or strength, share the experience of fear and the wish to avoid suffering. Animals tremble at the threat of harm, children shrink from pain, and even the strongest humans experience fear and anxiety. Recognizing this universal condition, the disciple learns that ethical behavior is not a personal preference, but a necessary response to the shared nature of life. By internalizing this understanding, the mind develops wisdom, seeing clearly that violence and cruelty cause harm to others and inevitably lead to negative consequences for oneself. The disciple begins to act with mindfulness, restraint, and compassion in all situations. The story of the ruler further illustrates the consequences of harming others. The monk warned that the accumulation of negative actions, even when motivated by authority or intention to maintain order, inevitably bears fruit in the form of suffering, mistrust, and karmic results. The ruler observed that fear-based governance creates resentment, agitation, and instability, whereas leadership guided by compassion, empathy, and restraint cultivates trust, harmony, and well-being. The disciple learns that ethical conduct is both protective and productive. It shields the mind from the consequences of unwholesome actions and fosters conditions conducive to peace, happiness, and spiritual growth. By practicing non-harming diligently, the disciple creates merit and stabilizes the mind, preparing it for insight and liberation. The verse further emphasizes the integration of mindfulness in daily life. The monk taught that ethical practice is not a ritual performed occasionally, but a continuous awareness applied to every thought, word, and action. The disciple is encouraged to observe impulses, recognizing tendencies toward aggression, anger, or selfishness, and to transform them into restraint, understanding, and compassion. Meditation strengthens this awareness, enabling the mind to remain steady and clear, even when confronted with provocation, challenge, or conflict. Ethical vigilance becomes a living practice, guiding the disciple to act in harmony with Dharma, preventing harm, and nurturing both personal and collective well-being. Additionally, the verse encourages the development of universal compassion. The monk explained that ethical practice extends beyond humans to all sentient beings, recognizing that every being fears suffering and desires happiness. By cultivating empathy and compassion for all life, the disciple nurtures a mind that refrains from harm, actively promotes well-being, and generates merit. This compassionate outlook fosters interconnectedness, reminding the practitioner that the welfare of others is inseparable from one's own welfare. Every action, thought, and intention becomes an opportunity to cultivate kindness, reduce suffering, and embody the principles of the Dharma. The teaching also highlights that non-harming is a path to inner peace. The monk illustrated that when the mind is free from aggression, ill will, and cruelty, it experiences serenity and stability. The disciple learns that external circumstances, power, or social position cannot bring true peace if the mind harbors violence, resentment, or fear. By cultivating compassion and restraint, the mind becomes protected, balanced, and clear, unaffected by provocation or adversity. Awareness of the shared experience of suffering encourages patience, tolerance, and understanding, enabling the disciple to act with wisdom and compassion in all situations. Furthermore, the verse emphasizes moral responsibility. The monk taught that the disciple must recognize the power and impact of every action, word, and intention. By comparing others with oneself, the practitioner develops insight into the consequences of harm, understanding that negative actions create suffering for both the victim and the doer. Ethical living is thus a conscious, intentional practice guided by mindfulness, compassion, and awareness of universal suffering. The disciple learns to act with care, cultivating virtue and merit in every aspect of life, understanding that ethical conduct is both protective and transformative. The story also illustrates the transformative power of reflection. The ruler, upon contemplating the monk's teachings, recognized the futility of causing harm and the wisdom of compassion. He began to lead with patience, empathy, and ethical awareness, creating harmony and well-being for his subjects. The disciple understands that ethical reflection allows one to transform habitual tendencies toward harm into habits of care, kindness, and understanding. By regularly contemplating the shared experience of fear and suffering, the mind becomes attuned to non-harming, naturally guiding thought, speech, and action toward compassion and virtue. Finally, the verse teaches that the practice of non-harming cultivates spiritual maturity. The monk explained that by refraining from violence, cultivating empathy, and acting with compassion, the disciple develops the qualities necessary for insight, wisdom, and liberation. Ethical conduct is inseparable from meditation and mindfulness, forming the foundation of a mind prepared to perceive truth and cultivate liberation. Awareness of universal fear and suffering motivates diligence, sincerity, and consistency in practice. The disciple learns that every ethical action, every moment of reflection, and every intention guided by compassion strengthens the mind, produces merit, and brings one closer to awakening, creating a life grounded in understanding, kindness, and peace. Thank you for watching my video. Namalamat ba. I wish to bring this merit towards all disciples and sentient beings, all of whom will attain Buddhahood. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I really appreciate your time.